What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I've often talked about great fighters of the past. In fact, I dedicated my entire channel to that conversation. But not often do I talk about the trainers, the managers, the venues, the gymnasiums in which these fighters were a part of. The gyms where they sharpened their skills, mastered their crafts. The venues where Hall of Fame and legendary fights were held. The trainers who would help prepare them to snap the jab, hook to the body, half step back, shoulder roll, and snap the right hand. There were managers who manipulated the ranking systems along with promoters and matchmakers in order to make these things happen. Let's talk about some of these legendary names right here on the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. Now, Harry Wiley Sr., I've talked about him many times, spoken about him, tried to get you to understand why he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, because he's not. He trained fighters such as Walker Smith, Rocky Castellani, Tommy Hogan, Canada Lee, Panama Joe Gans, worked with Joe Louis, worked with Henry Armstrong, Baby Joe Gans, Lou Ambers, Danny Cox, Archie Moore, Louis Spider Valentine. He was in the ring with Muhammad Ali in his last trip on the apron. And he prepared Muhammad Ali to defeat Buster Masters Sr. He was in the corner of Sonny Banks when Sonny Banks would drop Cassius Clay in New York's Madison Square Garden. He died February 8, 1972. He was 63 years of age at the time of his death. On that Olympic team, Lou Saliker, who lived in Brooklyn. I had the pleasure of meeting him. He would win the bronze medal, 1 medal of 5 in those games. He would become a bantamweight champion of the world. And Harry Wiley Sr. would have to be given credit for all those accomplishments. He had a gymnasium where he would prepare fighters on 129th Street and 7th Avenue. It was named the Salem Crescent Club. It was on the basement of the Salem Methodist Church. And it would be there where he would discover a young man named Smitty, Walker Smith. He already had fighters such as Danny Cox and Canada Lee. He already prepared fighters such as Henry Armstrong. For the Olympic Games, Armstrong came up short. But Armstrong would become a 3-time world champion simultaneously. Armstrong would win the welterweight championship title, 1938, from Barney Ross, New York Madison Square Garden Bowl. He would defeat Petey Cerrone, 1937. There he would have 27 fights, no losses with 26 knockouts. He would defeat Lou Ambers for the lightweight championship crown. All this took place in New York's Madison Square Garden. And Harry Wiley Sr., my opinion, top 3 greatest trainers in the entire history of the game. He was inspired to become a trainer by another trainer, in my opinion, top 3 greatest trainers of all time. And his name was Jimmy DeFrost. And I'll talk about him in a moment. Jimmy DeFrost would inspire Harry Wiley Sr. to become a trainer because Harry Wiley Sr. was a water boy for Jack Dempsey. He would wrap the hands from some legendary fighters, including Sam Langford. So Harry Wiley Sr. deserves to be recognized in this conversation. Ray Arcel, another legendary trainer, who were trained along with Whitey Bimstein in the legendary Stillman's Gymnasium. We'll talk about that gym in a moment. But he would train fighters such as Jimmy Braddock and Benny Leonard, Benny Vogler. I have to talk about him because Benny Vogler was, a lot of people don't even know who this man is. He's a Jewish fighter. He was an outstanding fighter. Oh. Ray Arcel would train Cisco Escobar and Frankie Gennaro, Lou Bullard, Alfonso Frazier, Ezzard Charles, and Tony Marino, Charlie Phil Rosenberg, and Jackie Kidberg, Cisco Escobar, Roberto Duran, Frankie Gennaro, I believe I mentioned him, Tony Zale, Seferino Garcia, Billy Seuss, and Freddie Steele, Barney Ross, Abe Goldstein, Bob Olin, and Larry Holmes. Just to name a few. He trained them all. I had the pleasure of meeting Ray Arcel. Spoke to him many times about the old times. What I learned from Ray Arcel, mind-blowing. About the time when Charlie Fusari was being looked at as a very good spoiler fighter. Because Joe Louis was being honored, He was being honored, it might have been 1935. And he talked about the time when Joe Louis was choked up as he was being honored. Because, let's face it, Joe Louis was a black fighter. And black fighters were not celebrated or appreciated during that time. To this day, there's still a problem with the black fighters' accomplishments. Well, let's next talk about Emanuel Stewart. Emanuel Stewart was a head trainer of the Kronk Gymnasium in Detroit, 5555 McClure Avenue, 33rd Junction Street. There he would train fighters such as Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum, James Lights Out Tony, Thomas the Motor City Cobra Hearns, Helmer Kenty, Mickey Goodwin, Dwayne Thomas, Ricky Womack, Aaron the Hawk Pryor, Jarrell McLennan. He had fighters such as Jimmy Paul, Milt McCory, Klitschko, and many others. Had the pleasure of knowing Emanuel Stewart. Emanuel Stewart was stand-up individual. I remember when he started training. I mean, he became a known figure back in the late 70s. Remember that like that was yesterday. Before many people knew of him outside of his circles. He grew to be a very good trainer. Brilliant mind. He was a dynamic trainer. He trained Lennox Lewis and many, many others. So Emanuel Stewart deserves to be in this conversation. The next trainer was Eddie Futch. Eddie Futch had 21 world champions. Share a story with you about Eddie Futch. Eddie Futch I knew very well. As well, I should say. He was born in Hillsborough, Mississippi, August 9th, 1911. He died October 10th, 2001. His parents moved to Detroit, Michigan, which was a section of Black Bottom in Detroit. He played semi-pro basketball at the YMCA. He began to box at the age of 15. In 1932, he would win Detroit Athletic Association lightweight championship title. 1935, he would win the Detroit Golden Gloves, trained at Brewster Center. It's the same gym that Joe Louis would train in. In fact, he had sparred with Ray Robinson and Joe Louis, Holman Williams, and many of them in that gymnasium. He trained fighters such as Kenny Norton, Big Boy Brown, Charlie Burley, Joe Frazier. His first champion was Don Jordan. He would train Riddick Bowe, Big Daddy. At that time, he was known as the Sugar Bear. Alexis Arguello, Marlon Starling, who was known as the Magic Man, or Moochie. Montel Griffin, Wayne McCullum, Michael the Jinx Spinks. Montel Griffith. He would train with Harry Bobo and Charlie Burley, Big Boy Brown, Charlie Smith, when he was fighting himself. Brewster Center, you hear about that gym a lot. It came to be in 1929. It was closed down in 2006. It was between Brewster and Bushwick Park section of Detroit. It was an old public library that was renovated. It stood from 1917 to 1929. And from 1929 to 2006 is when Brewster Center was in operation. It took $500,000 to renovate it. And Ray Robinson and Joe Louis had trained there. Now, Leon Wheeler was a manager of the Recreation Park Department from 1919 to 1945. It would be he that would make the suggestion of having that library renovated. Had it not been for Leon Wheeler, may not have been of Joe Louis Barrow. What was special about Eddie Futch, Muhammad Ali's 5 losses would come from Eddie Futch's fighters, Kenny Norton and Smoking Joe Frazier. He seemed to have the key to victory of Muhammad Ali. Eddie Futch would also train Virgil Hill and many others. Remember, he was in the corner of Cubanito Perez, along with Angelo Dundee, when Perez was fighting Meldrick Taylor. I was in the second row of that fight. It was a remarkable fight for the young up-and-coming Philadelphia fighter Meldrick Taylor. Another trainer was Jimmy DeFrost. Jimmy DeFrost was something else. Have him, along with Harry Wiley Sr., top 3 greatest trainers of all times. No question about it. It was Jimmy DeFrost who would inspire and encourage Harry Wiley Sr. to become a trainer. As I said, Harry Wiley Sr. would wrap the hands of some great fighters in the past, including Sam Langford. He would carry the water bucket of Jack Dempsey, among others. But Jimmy DeFrost would train Jim Jeffries, Jack Dempsey, Stanley Ketchel, Harry Greb, Joe Gans, Joe Walcott, George Dixon, Tommy Ryan, Jack Sharkey, and many, many others. When he trained Mickey Walker, and he would prepare him for the Harry Greb fight, that was as legendary as you can get because they fought each other. Greb and Walker. Jack Blackburn, another man that deserves to be in the Hall of Fame as a fighter. He's already a Hall of Famer as a trainer. And the reason why he's a Hall of Famer as a trainer, he trained Lou Ambrose and Sammy Mandel, Jersey Joe Walcott, Charles Bud Taylor, the Leaperville Shadow, George Godfrey. But he trained Joe Louis, the Bound Bomber. Joe Louis would be a 25 title defense heavyweight champion, reigned 11 and a half years, 10 months or so, 12 years combined with the exhibitions and so on and so forth, time in the military. But Jack Blackburn had trained 2 heavyweights to become a heavyweight champion. Joe Louis in 37, when he defeated Jimmy Braddock at Kaminsky Park in Chicago, only to become the 2nd black heavyweight champion in boxing history. But he also trained Jersey Joe Walcott, who would become the 4th black heavyweight champion in boxing history. He knew about one, but he didn't know about the other, Joe Walcott, because Blackburn died in 1942 in Chicago. He suffered from pneumonia and a heart attack. Great trainer was Jack Blackburn. Remarkable, to say the least. As we look at some more trainers, Angelo Dundee, who operated out of Fifth Street Gym, but he was originally a water boy and a towel man, as they called it, along with Lou Duver in Stillman's Gymnasium in Manhattan. But then when his brother, Chris Dundee, would open up the Fifth Street Gym in 1950, and he would have him come over and work with the fighters. It closed, I believe, in 1993. And Angelo Dundee would train fighters such as Ray Leonard, and Carmen Basilio, Muhammad Ali, Willie Pastrana, Luis Rodriguez, Jose Napoles, Jimmy Ellis. You know, Angelo Dundee was a special trainer and had a lot of laughs with him. He was born August 30th, 1921 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He died February 1st, 2012. He was 90 years of age at the time of his death, and he would reside in Tampa, Florida. And he would be involved in boxing from 1955 to 2005. And when he passed away, I had to take a deep breath. I knew a lot of them. I have a friend, Ramiro, who just recently we talked about Chris Dundee and his brother Angelo Dundee. And Freddie Pacheco, R.I.P. to him. They all used to, for many years, try to make the game better than what it was. So Angelo Dundee deserves to be in this conversation. Had world champions across the board in every weight division. He was a phenomenal humanitarian, a very good trainer, Angelo Dundee. Then, of course, you had trainers such as Jimmy Glenn. He would spend time in Times Square boxing ring in Manhattan. You had fighters such as Terrence Ali and Bobby Joe Young and many, many others. Bone Crusher Smith. But then you would have Cus D'Amato. He trained Floyd Patterson, Jose Torres, Mike Tyson, Willie Pastrana, and many others. You have Sam Solomon, who would train Matthew Saad Muhammad, and Eugene Cyclone Hart, Anthony the Animal Fletcher. Georgie Benton, who trained Evander Holyfield, Pernell Whitaker, Meldrick Taylor, Rocky Lockridge, Johnny Bump City Bumpus, Frankie Chiquita Warren, just to name a few. He was a trainer of many, Smoking Joe Frazier. So many men that he would actually be in the corner of. But as a fighter, he was known as the mayor of Philadelphia. Had a hell of a shoulder roll and crab defense. Biggest fight was with Reuben Hurricane Carter. And that was as textbook as you can find it. Every tool in the game was used in that fight. Remind me of James Lights Out Tony and Mike the Body Snatcher McCallum. All textbook combinations used in that fight. Georgie Benton. I remember when George used to bring catfish to Lenny Shores Boxing Gym, located in Totowa, New Jersey, on Totowa Avenue. And Georgie Benton used to prepare that catfish at Lou Duver's. He had a restaurant by Main Events, and he would bring catfish for a very good friend, old timer, great fighter, great referee, that he would train towards the end of his life. His name was Paul Cavalier. He had a brother named Art Cavalier. He had Ace Murata. They were all in that gym. And he would bring catfish for him. Georgie Benton was something else. I had great conversations with Georgie Benton. He needs to be recognized. Because he was a hell of a trainer, my God. But he was an outstanding Philadelphia fighter. Quintessential fighter, if you will. He had Nacho Beristain. He would train Julio Cesar Chavez and Daniel Zaragoza, Juan Manuel Marquez, and Oscar De La Hoya, Abner Mares. I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Beristain is very underrated. I knew him. I knew Ramon Felix, who trained Jose Luis Ramirez and Julio Cesar Chavez. And after Ramon Felix died from a swimming accident, he drowned. He had an assistant by the name of Buffalo Martin. Martin would take over the career of Zuma Nelson and Julio Cesar Chavez. Yeah, Slim Jim Robinson out of Philadelphia. He would train Mike Rossman, Mustafa Muhammad, Alfonso Ratliff, who was a cruiserweight champion, Tim Witherspoon, and Ricky Parkey, and Zuma Nelson. You had a trainer by the name of Quinzel McCall. A lot of people don't know who he is. Great contributions to the game of pugilism. You had gymnasiums, legendary Champ Gym. There you had Leotis Martin, Muhammad Kawi, Bad Benny Briscoe, Stanley Kitten Haywood, Quinzel McCall, be a trainer there. You had Coverlade's Gymnasium. Smoking Joe Frazier was Joe Frazier's gym. Coverlade was incorporated with Joe Frazier, put the money up for him. There you had Willie Reddish, who was an outstanding light heavyweight, who was in the corner of Sonny Liston, Muhammad Ali, who trained with Meldrick T and T Taylor. He had a vicious shoulder roll with Willie Reddish. I knew him very well. Harold Johnson, I knew very well. Gypsy Joe Harris, I knew very well. They all trained at Joe Frazier's gym, along with hundreds of others. Philadelphia Boxing Gym, Eddie Reed and Gene Johnson. Derek Ennis. Yeah, Silver Memorial Gym. Bobby Dobbs was an outstanding lightweight. He was a colored lightweight champion of the world. Now you had the St. Paul's Boxing Club, 207 Dakota Building in St. Paul's, Minnesota. At the St. Paul Auditorium, 7,500 square feet of real estate. And you had men such as Billy Misk and Mike O'Dowd, Mike Gibbons and Tom Gibbons, and Mai Sullivan, who came out of those gyms. Dr. Byers Training Quarters, located on 152nd West 42nd Street in New York. Ringside Gymnasium, 154 West 12th Street, Los Angeles, California. Gore's Gym, Miami Beach, Florida. Bill Gore was the manager, and he would manage light heavyweight Joe Knight and featherweight Bucky Burden. Yeah, Ridgewood Grove Sporting Club, Incorporated. St. Nicholas Avenue, Palomita, Ridgewood, New York. Main Street Arena and Gymnasium, 319th South Main Street, Los Angeles, California. Trafton's Loop Gym, 180, 184 West, Randolph Street, Chicago, Illinois. George Trafford, the owner, and Babe Barron was the manager. Dr. Byers Training Quarters, Pumpkin Lakes, New Jersey. Dr. Joe Byatt, 152 West 42nd Street. Pioneer Sporting Club, Gymnasium Incorporated. Charlie Darsery, 340 West 44th Street, New York. Jimmy DeForce, 338 West 44th Street, New York. I talked about Jimmy DeForce. In fact, I'll get to Jimmy DeForce in a moment. Yeah, Bonnie Williams, formerly Gus Williams, is affiliated with George Compartier, who was a light heavyweight champion, and Jack Dempsey as well, heavyweight champion. St. Nicholas Gymnasium, 69 West 66th Street, 20,000 square feet of training space. I told you I'd tell you a little bit more about Jimmy DeForce. Jimmy DeForce had a book. It was about 4 or 5 books. I know I have them all, training books on the science of boxing, because he believed in the science of boxing. And he was so, he could break down a fight better than anyone that I know of, I should say. Always wore a 3-piece suit, smoked a cigar. Very small man, but he was brilliant. He was brilliant. And he had all the fighters from the teens to the 1920s. Jimmy DeForce was a hell of a trainer. I can't say much more about him. Laurel's Gardens and Newark, New Jersey. Babe Coleman ran a facility there. The New York Coliseum, East 177th Street, New York. Jack McKenna was the matchmaker, and Captain Whitwell was the promoter. Boston Madison Square Garden, North Station in Boston, Massachusetts. Ray Cass was the matchmaker, and Alex McLean was the matchmaker, as well as Al Wow. Al Wow would wind up becoming a matchmaker for Rocky Marciano. Then he would become his manager, and Rocky Marciano would drop Al Wow. And Al Wow would bet against Rocky Marciano. What a relationship these men would have. Coney Island Velodrome, West 12th Street, and Neptune Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. Main Street Arena and Gymnasium. St. Nicholas Arena. The promoter there, you had Bill Johnson, 66th Street near Broadway. And the matchmaker was Tony Martillo in New York. Now, St. Nicholas Arena used to be an ice skating palace. In fact, the ice skating palace was ran during the day and the gym was ran at night. A very interesting setting. St. Nicholas Arena was where Benny Leonard would die. I'm not sure if it was 1949, but he would be refereeing a fight and he would collapse, have a heart attack in the ring, and he would die. St. Nicholas Arena, you had some great fights. Great fights. Stillman's Gymnasium, 326 West 57th Street, New York, 8th Avenue. Lou Stillman was the manager. And then the address was 919. So the door was changed from one side to the next. Dyckman Oval, 10th Avenue, and Academy Street in the Bronx, New York. Johnny Attell was the matchmaker. Broadway Arena, Josh Promoter. It was on Broadway in Brooklyn, New York. Tavern, Mickey Walker's Restaurant. Now, Mickey Walker's restaurant was next to Adams Hats. And that was next to Madison Square Garden, 8th Avenue and 49th Street. Next to there, you had the Automat. The Automat was somewhat of a store. From the sidewalk, you can put money in and get sandwiches and coffee. It was like if you're in a hospital and you go down to the cafeteria and you look at a vending machine and you see certain things that you want, and then a cup would come down and coffee would come out, or soda would come out. You open up the doors, little glass doors, and pull out a sandwich or dessert or whatever it is. Well, that's what the automat was, but it was like a store. And everyone went to the automat during those days. Jack Dempsey's restaurant was across the street from Mickey Walker's Tavern, Mickey Walker's restaurant, across the street from Madison Square Garden. It was on 50th Street and 8th Avenue in New York. Now, one more thing about Mickey Walker's. Mickey Walker's restaurant had pictures of fighters from the top of the wall of the ceiling to the bottom wall of the floor. All four walls were full with pictures. Imagine who has that collection today. We would have Empire Gymnasium, 877 Hancock Street in Brooklyn, New York. You would have Paul Gallo's Gymnasium, 1102 Broadway in New York. Broadway Sporting Club. You'd have San Francisco Dreamland. Hollywood Bowl, Los Angeles Olympic Club. Sacramento's American Legion. San Diego Coliseum. Seattle Athletic Club. They were all in California. Kelly Hayes Gymnasium, 53 Hanover Street in Boston, Massachusetts. Harry Kelly was the manager and the owner. Star Casino, East 107th Street and Park Avenue, New York City. Billy Brown was the matchmaker. Jamaica Arena, Jamaica, Long Island. Lou Rose was the promoter, and Eddie Larson was the matchmaker. Chicago Stadium, promoter there was Nate Lewis and Jim Mullen. You got the Statis Arena, Coney Island, New York. Jess McCannon was the promoter. Grubbs Gymnasium, 252 West, 116th Street. You hear me talk about that gym often. Harlem, New York. Dyer Darlings was an outstanding fitness trainer. But he would be there in that gymnasium, along with Dick Jones. Harry Wiley Sr. would train fighters there as well. You had the New Garden. It was a gymnasium, 151, 153 West 125th Street in New York. St. Nicholas Gymnasium, 69 West 66th Street in New York. Newark Boxing Club, 128th Street and Market Street in Newark, New Jersey. All right, this is Scrapbook Boxing, Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. All great fights, all great fighters will never be forgotten on my channel. Thanks for watching. I just wanted to give you some information on some of the gymnasiums and